I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we dive into the heart-pounding world of Odat, Orbital Drop Armor Team. It's written by a wonderful author by the name of Alexander Tambascia. This military sci-fi series, penned by a U.S. Army Armor CAV officer, promises edge-of-your-seat action and futuristic warfare. Join us as we explore this gripping narrative that blends real military experiences with a captivating sci-fi twist. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Alexander, great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Tell us how your real life military experiences influenced the creation of Odat.
Well, yeah, basically the experiences I am using is basically my years when I got commissioned. So I kind of excluded my enlisted years, and mainly because during my enlisted years, I enlisted too late for the first Desert War. Basically, I graduated by the time I graduated basic training, the war was over. So when I became an officer, so when I first started my tours of combat, so that's where I kind of narrowed my focus. And I talk about my experiences through KFOR and SFOR, and that was my first time as a soldier experiencing genocide. I mean, it not to belittle or how can I put this? Not to belittle what it felt like for a World War II person, but in many ways, I felt like that first person, U.S. soldier who stepped into Auschwitz and saw that inhumanity.
Yeah.
Now, I will admit, what they saw is probably 1,000 times worse than what I saw. But for me, being a 20th century, late 20th century soldier, experiencing that only my grandfather taught, and seeing it was a big emotional hit. And then going from there, I talk about my Afghanistan. When I go to Afghanistan, I cover, and that's really in my second book, which is getting released at the end of the month, where I talk about the Twin Towers and going to Afghanistan and dealing with everything that dealt with that. And then my final book of the series, which will be dealing with when I was in Iraq and dealing with everything that dealt with the Taliban, not the Taliban, the Iraq. My memory escapes me, but the Iraqi insurgents after we conquered Saddam, and having them all constantly blowing up the wells and doing harass tactics. So I kind of encompassed all that in my books, and I wrote these books not from the perspective of I want to give a great story. I didn't write these from I want a great story. I wrote this perspective because I, as someone who came enlisted, climbed to the ranks, seeing new kids come in who think the military's like the movies. They think the military is like Full Metal Jacket. No, don't get me wrong. Army, Gunny, love him, and he did portray 100% what boot camp was in the Marine Corps. But a majority, when you went to the end of the movie, all the Vietnam stuff, it was all dramatized. And I wrote this book saying, I want, when a reader reads my book, to understand what it felt like to be in combat. In book one of my readers commented about how the way I talk about my first stabbing and kill, my first person I stabbed and killed in combat. And I talk about how I looked in his eyes and everything. And one of my readers said he's never seen anywhere someone so graphically describe what it feels like to do that. And, because I want people when they read my book to understand that my life is nowhere am I saying I'm a glory, I'm a hero. I'm just saying I'm just a poor guy who comes from a long military line of family, and I want to serve my nation, and I'm thrown into combat that our country hasn't seen really since Vietnam. Right. That level. And so you have a whole generation that lived post Vietnam, and it and so you got that big gap there. So it like my father would tell me whatnot, and I couldn't really appreciate what my father meant when he was in Nam until I was in these scenarios.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. So these books are basically your life story, your memoir, but somewhat fictionalized, of course, and turned into kind of a sci-fi story, right?
Well, long story. I was diagnosed by the VA as being terminal because of my exposures in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Hmm.
So at the time, I said, I don't want to die with no one not even knowing who I am. So I met this very famous, amazing author, Jonathan Yanez. He
Hmm.
is a #1 international seller sci-fi. And I said to him, I said, hey, Jonathan, I told him the story. I don't want to be forgotten. Can I be a character in your book? So Jonathan got very close to me. He's like a brother to me. And we talk. And he finally says to me, he goes, I have no problem putting you in my book, but you really need to tell your story. You need to
Hmm.
write it. And I said, Jonathan, I'm not you. I can't write an autobiography. First of all, it will probably be cure and not collapse. And he said, do you know who Kurt Vonnegut is? I said, of course I do.
Hmm.
Brave New World. Every good sci-fi person knows that. He goes, did you know that Brave New World was his autobiography in a sci-fi setting about drug addiction he had?
Hmm.
I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And he looked at me dead face. He goes, if Kurt Vonnegut can do it, why can't you? And that's how my book came to being written. It's I basically took my real world experiences, my real world relationship, and just put it behind a backdrop of sci-fi. I mean, most of the major battles I talk about actually happened. They were real.
Yeah.
Most of the people I met are real people in my book that I met and worked with. It's just a different backdrop.
Right. Well, obviously, these books are thrilling. Obviously, they're very realistic. They're captivating. I think they'd be a terrific series of films, a terrific television series, even animated series. Have you thought about that at all?
Funny you say that. My readers have been on my fan group called Imperial Command on Facebook. They're constantly writing like, when are we going to see the anime? When are we going to see the Netflix or Hulu series? And I'm like,
Right.
as truly as it really touches my heart, I really love that my fans love my writing that much to ask me this. It's like I got to keep telling them, like I'm just a brand new author. I am nowhere as close as Jonathan Yanez, Jeffrey Haskell, T.E. Butcher, B.V. Larson, you
Yeah.
know. So I said, as much as I would love to, and if a student came to me, I would definitely talk to them about it.
Hmm.
But I think it would be arrogant of me to say, it's going to be a TV story, my stuff before someone like B.V. Larson, who has over 122 best international sci-fi sellers.
Right. Well, it's not arrogant of me to say it, so I will. I think this would be a terrific series of either TV series or films. It's got great action. It's got great realistic military vibes to it. And of course, it's just a terrific story based on the author's real life adventures, if you want to call it that, overseas. Wonderful. Three books in this series, Alexander?
Yes.
Okay.
Book 1 talks about KFOR and SFOR.
Mhm.
Book 2, which I just finished and will be available in pre-sale at the end of the month, talks about Afghanistan and the fall of the two towers. And my third book, we're going to be starting this summer, will be about my experiences in OEF. And I decided that I'm going to stop the series there and do a different arc in the same universe, talk about different things that are a little bit less emotional, stressful, more fictional. And maybe down the road I might make a fourth book to this series, but I want to try to break away from reality and go more into the science fiction realm,
Mhm.
because one of the most difficult things for me in the writing of these books is remembering close friends that I served with that got killed in combat. And
Yeah.
book 2 took me a very long time to write because 2 people I mentioned in the book are extremely close friends of mine and they were killed in combat, and it's an emotional tool to try to bring that up, and because I spent literally years putting it in a box in the back of my brain so I'll forget about it, and having to go back and rip that case open. It's emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're writing it, you're living there, you're back in that time and space. So it is quite difficult, of course. Well, we've been talking today about Odat, Orbital Drop Armor Team. It's written by Alexander Tambascia. It is an amazing military sci-fi series penned by a U.S. Army Armor CAV officer. It is edge of your seat action, futuristic warfare, 3 books in the series. You won't want to put them down. You'll be looking for more, and you'll be looking for it on the big screen, hopefully sometime in the near future. Alexander, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you inviting me.
I appreciate your time. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.